I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 70. Today in the show, with season openers on our doorstep, we're reviewing a number of easy ways to royally screw up your hunting season. And spoiler alert, you are not supposed to do these things. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Sitka Gear. Now, today with hunting season either started for some folks or starting soon, Dan and I decided that we are just going to dive into a handful of different screw-ups that you do not want to make in the coming months. Now, that's assuming you're interested in killing a mature buck. So, it's going to be an interesting chat. And it's also going to be kind of laid back. We do not have a guest today, but we have for the past few weeks, and those have been great and super informational, but, we kind of enjoy kicking back a little bit and talking just the two of us. So that's the plan. It should be fun. And, Dan, you ready to let loose a little bit?
I'm never not letting loose.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm always letting loose.
That's true.
I always let it fly in public. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think so.
Good. Now that we got that straightened out.
We can only try to restrain you a little bit, and that's a challenge.
You can only hope to contain me.
Yeah, it's not likely.
People really, that awesome Detroit Lions running back, what was his name? Barry Sanders.
Yeah.
People compare me to him a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're like, man, you're like Barry Sanders.
You look very much alike.
Well, aside from looks, I got mad juking skills too, and my personality is like how he runs, just all over the place.
I'll give you the last one.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the juking. I feel like you're more of like a big tree fall hard type, but
Okay. Well, I tell you what, just wait until we get up in the mountains, and we'll see who's laughing.
Yeah, we will. Man, no, I'm dying.
Speaking of that, I got a question for you. This elk hunting that we're going on, is this going to be no man left behind or slow man it gets left behind type of hunt?
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in survival of the fittest. So,
okay.
If you survive, that's great, but I can't guarantee it.
So if my leg snaps, you're just like, well, here's a gun with one bullet in it, buddy, type of thing.
Call me if you get out.
I'll meet you at the truck.
No, it's gonna be fine. It'll be fun. I'm getting excited about it. We've been all over the place and over the last year figuring out what we're gonna do, and it's been this and then that and then this and now finally this again. But I'm excited. We're gonna do a pretty cool trip. So it's less than 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now we will be in the mountains chasing elk, and you are gonna love it, my friend. You are gonna absolutely love it.
I've been listening to a lot of jock jams to pump myself up for it.
That's the typical elk pump up session music is
That's
Jock
what
James.
that's what I read somewhere anyway.
What are you reading?
Blogs.
Yeah, it's cool. I've been listening to a bunch of like different bugling YouTube videos. I know you have too, just because that gets me all tingly inside. So I'm stoked.
We're again already off track.
That's kind of how we roll when it's
That
just
is.
you and me, Dan. But whitetail stuff.
Whitetail
You been
stuff.
doing any fun whitetail stuff since we chatted last?
Nope.
Nothing. You're just
Other than shooting my bow, I had my weekend, my weekend where I went out with, Ben, and we sat a couple stands, and since then, father, husband, you know, guardian to a Maltese, it's like you don't really get to go out that much anymore, especially when my property's so far away. But I don't know if I covered this last week. I was driving around the area like I always do, and doing some
around your house.
around where I live. 1 mile from my front step, I saw a 160 and a well over 170 10-pointer with junk off his G2s
Ooh.
standing in the middle of this hayfield.
Wow.
So I found the farmer. I got access to his property.
Nice.
But here's the problem. It must have just been the right moon phase or whatever, wind direction, temperature, just the perfect timing. Because the property to the east is a horse rehabilitation center. The property to the other property is a residential. A family lives on like just a square chunk of CRP, and the timber is like a quarter mile away from it. So I think after I get off the phone with you, I'm going to go set up a trail camera in hopes to at least catch them on camera.
So on the farm you have access to, is there any huntable ground? Any trees you can get up in?
It's going to have to be a ground blind situation.
Gotcha.
They're standing corn on this property.
And then just CRP or other stuff or what?
Well, like I said, residential. So the horse pasture butts right up to this little opening in the gate where I feel these deer are coming through, and then on the other side of it is a house inside of a giant CRP field, and there's like a strip of trees that are very small that come all the way up to this field, but it's like a fence row, an old fence row that they tore the fence down but left the trees in, and then the main chunk of timber where I feel they were bedding is like a quarter mile away.
Gotcha. Interesting. So if you get them on camera, are you going to try to do an early season setup?
Mm-hmm.
That's sweet.
That's the point. And I've knocked on a couple of the other doors in the area and haven't had a chance to talk with anybody yet. But I'm still going to try to access the main chunk of timber to see if I can get in it that way. And who knows? Who knows what'll happen?
Heck yeah, man. That's awesome. When you can find something close to your house like that, that's super helpful for you too, given your, obligations and stuff.
That's right. That's right. So it makes it easy when I can tell the wife, hey, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
And then drive out there. I've driven by the property like 4 or 5 other times and haven't seen a single deer in the field. So I don't know if it was just right wind, right time type of deal, or maybe they got spooked out, or I don't know. But
well, they're in the area.
They're in the area. That's right.
That's sweet. Well, I don't have any booner sightings to share. Oh well. Did I tell you about the Michigan giant I saw just after Ohio? Did I tell you about that?
You mentioned something to me. I don't know. Did you get any pictures of it?
I got film of him. Like
Okay.
the day I got back from our Ohio trip, I must have told you about this. I was out there in Michigan driving around and saw just an absolute toad, the biggest buck I've seen in Michigan in a couple of years. I'm pretty sure he was north of 170. So that was cool. I watched him for like 20 minutes from the side of the road. He was with another couple nice bucks way back in the soybean field, and they just didn't care, which is really unique in Michigan. Usually, even if there's deer way far away, if you stop, they're gone in like 10 seconds. But these deer didn't care. So that was fun to watch those guys. And other than that, though, nothing exciting on trail camera here. Checked again, just the same. Well, this This time, no bucks at all. 0 bucks in the last 13 days. So that's really encouraging. But I am doing a bunch of work on these properties, getting some final things done since you know the story. I've been gone. So last minute stuff. I got my food plots planned on Friday, which was something I've been stressing about, trying to hopefully get rain. And I finally had rain in the forecast on Saturday and Sunday. So spent a good chunk of time on Friday getting all that planted. I did get some rain on Saturday, not quite as much as I was hoping for, but better than nothing. So now I've just got my fingers crossed, hoping that we will have something else come here in the next couple of days and keep those babies growing, because if I don't, they're going to be in trouble. But that's kind of all new with me. I did check on a couple tree stands, did some more final trimming, a couple things like that, just made sure everything in Michigan was good to go. But yeah, now I'm done in Michigan. Everything's set. I'm not going to be going in the woods anymore till October. So
I think I'm gonna try to force. It's gonna piss my wife off, but I'm gonna force a trail camera check. Maybe, let's see, you're picking me up next Sunday.
Yeah.
And I think I'm gonna maybe run down on Saturday to go check my trail cameras, and that way I can have a good idea of what's going on, because September, we're getting back somewhere like the 19th or the 20th, and then I actually am busy the following weekend, and then the weekend after that, opening weekend. So it's on.
It's going to be your fest. Yeah, that's the
Yep.
truth. Well, that'll be good. You'll check your cameras, that weekend, and I'm actually planning on trying to do a day trip down to Ohio next week.
Nice.
So we'll have a final trail camera pull from there too. So then we should have our final velvet trail camera photos from Iowa and Ohio at least.
Are you gonna be able to get to yours? When are you getting your Iowa property?
Iowa property, I'm probably not going to get to check till I go in October.
Okay, gotcha.
Unless, well, I was going to say, when I swing by to pick you up, I could potentially stop by, but I don't think we want to put any more time on that. So I'll just have Ohio, but we'll at least be able to compare those two.
That's right.
So I'm really excited to see how they finished off, especially Glenn, since I didn't have any pictures of him since early July, and I think he had a lot more growing to do. So excited to see him. I just last night watched one of our old videos from 3 years ago from Wired to Hunt that showed our first rut on our Ohio property, me and my buddy Josh, and I was watching an old video the first time we saw Glenn. We saw him like 3 times that first week in November. Running around, he was probably like a 115 to 120 inch 8-pointer with a missing G3. And it's cool to look at him then and now see what he is now, and just what an unbelievable jump he's taken in body size and antler size. And man, 3 years history will be pretty cool. So hopefully he'll stick around. I'm excited to see.
I know a lot of people focus on the antlers, but one thing that I've been recently doing is I get a trail camera picture, and obviously the antlers will tell you who the buck is, because that's where their character lies. But I like to put a trail camera picture of a buck from the previous year or the year before next to the same buck, from this year, and I cover their antlers up, and they make huge jumps on a body scale too.
Oh yeah.
In from their 2-year-old to their 4-year-old body, or even from their 3-year-old to their 4-year-old body. And then after that, it just looks like, some of these bucks are looking like bodybuilders. I mean, they got your fat bucks, and then you got your ripped bucks. And man, I got a couple bucks that look like horses, like straight up defined shoulders, up muscles in their hindquarters, and they're sunken in shoulders. And they look like they have horse bodies. And I love that.
Yeah, just a big old mature, huge body buck. I've killed some, 3 and 4-year-olds that were decent sized bucks. And then the 5-year-old I killed a couple of years ago was in the winter, so he was smaller body. He didn't have as big rutted up body. I still want to kill just a huge bodied, crazy rutted up buck. Just one of those mega-toed body-wise buck. That's really what I'm hoping to get this year.
Yeah.
Now here's a
One
question.
where the taxidermist has to make a special mount for you.
Just because his forehead is so huge.
Yep.
Did you see our video of the day today on Wired Hunt by any chance?
I have not had a chance to check that out.
So it was a video of Dan Perez from Whitetail Properties, and it was just a quick clip from one of his hunts, and he had a really big-bodied, mature 6-pointer come in, and he ended up passing on it. But it reminded me of my encounters with that buck a few years ago, 6-shooter, who was just a giant 6-pointer like 4 years ago. And I'm curious, if you had one of these huge-bodied deer that was obviously 5, just like chunky, big, mature deer, but he's just a big framed 6-pointer.
Yeah.
When you're there in Iowa, you've got all these, crazy, huge antlered deer. Would you take that buck?
Oh yeah, in a heartbeat. For me, it's mature. That's what puts the deer on my hit list is maturity.
Yeah,
I mean, would it be awesome to have a wall with giant antlers on it? Yes, but one thing I always do is when I go to the Iowa Deer Classic, you walk around the Hall of Fame or where they have all the mounts from out the year, and big antlers stick out, and that's awesome. But what really sticks out is a gigantic necked, big bodied mount of a deer. What you're just like, holy cow, that is a huge buck.
Yeah. What about this one? Let's say you've got one of your big shooters, obviously mature, but he broke off half his rack. He's in front of you. What would you do then?
Depends on how old he is. If he's a 4 or 5 year old, I'd probably let him walk. And if I have a lot of history with him, let's say, well, Ryan Iberg is going to get an arrow even if he's got both antlers broken off this year, because I just don't know if he's going to make it.
Yeah.
He's 7 years old this year, so he has the potential to start going down. But we have all these other deer that seem to be making it through the years. Like if Tupac came by with broken antler, like just one antler, even though I shot him before and would love to shoot that buck again, good chance I'd let him walk knowing that he's only a 5-year-old.
Gotcha.
So, or 5 or 6 year old this year. So, and I have some other deer like that. It's one of those things where you can't really make that kind of decision until you see them and have that opportunity. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's a tough one. To the 6-pointer, I would definitely take a big 6-pointer if he was super mature. Again, the body size, age of a deer would be awesome. But though, I mean, let's be honest too. We do enjoy, and this is one of those things that I struggle with, internally in my head, because I personally, I don't believe I am, and I don't want to be someone who's just, who just cares about, antlers. And I'm not, obviously, because I care about a lot of aspects of the hunt, the maturity. I like hunting mature deer because of the challenge, because of the rarity. And I think maybe as I try to rationalize myself, why do I care about antlers? It's not that I want it just for some trophy that hangs on the wall, like a basketball trophy. That's not it. And the way I kind of, as I self-analyze all this stuff, I kind of think of it like I value and appreciate the rarity of a deer like that. And it has value not just because it's something cool to look at, but because it's difficult to even find deer like that, to see deer like that. And there's an appreciation for that beauty, that uniqueness, that, I don't know. But there is something to be said about antlers, and I think it's okay to be excited about antlers. It's okay to talk about big antlers, as long as that's, at least, again, I'm rambling here, but for me in my head, as long as that's not all you care about, I think, that's healthy. So when it comes to antlers in a mature deer, let's say there's a huge 6-year-old bodied deer that comes rolling in, let's say on my Ohio property, and I've got, numerous bucks that are 4 to 6 years old. I've got a bunch in the 150 plus category, so there's lots of options there. I want to kill a mature deer. If I had a big bodied, huge bodied, mature 6-pointer come in, I would take that deer probably. But I would definitely be sitting there thinking because there is the chance for these deer I have history with. I don't even know in that situation in Ohio, because, if Glenn and Junkyard and JJ and all these guys are around, and if I'm seeing them and I have history with them, like you said, it comes down to a in-the-moment decision of, do I want to end my season now? Because in Ohio, that's it. You get one tag and you're done. And there is something to be said about just being picky. No matter what your criteria is, it's kind of fun to be really picky and have to, meet that challenge.
Yep.
But I can tell you what, most anywhere else, if I'm even in Iowa or obviously here in Michigan, if there's a super big mature buck, I'm not going to care too much about what the antlers are. I'm going to be slinging an arrow because mature deer like that are not easy to hunt.
Right. Period. I mean, it's not like rack dictates their intelligence, which the hunting industry kind of makes it seem like it's all about the rack. It's not. It's about the age, and that's what's hard to kill.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. I just went around in a circle there for about 5 minutes.
That's all right. Hey, this is a no holds barred type of podcast today.
Isn't it no bars held? I don't even. How's that saying go?
Haven't you seen the movie with Hulk Hogan? It's called No Holds Bars.
No.
I know, that's how I know, is because I watched a movie with Hulk Hogan in it.
Well, if he is a source on all things reputable about grammar, so I'd say that's pretty good. All right. So we've successfully talked for 20 minutes about maybe nothing. But what we were planning on talking about today was, some different ways that you can royally screw up your hunting season. And you and me both have experienced some of these. And I know in a past episode, earlier this year, we talked about some of our biggest mistakes that you and me have made over the years. But today what I want to do is talk about some of the very most common mistakes that, the average hunter makes out there. And talk about, what those might be. Because these are things that a lot of guys are probably going to be encountering in the coming weeks or month. So talk through some of those most popular, most common mistakes and, share how we've dealt with them, how we would recommend others deal with them. And then who knows? I never know where these conversations might go, and it's just you and me. So this is kind of a loosey-goosey episode. I'm gonna say we just talk about some of these issues, some of these mistakes, and see what happens. What do you think about that?
Let's do it.
Yeah, I agree. So before we do get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, though, we do need to pause briefly for a word from our sponsor of this podcast, Sitka Gear. Now, last week in our series with Sitka, I asked product category leader Dennis Zuck why Sitka doesn't use carbon or some other scent eliminating technology in most of their gear. And he shared that Sitka will only bring technology to market that can be absolutely proven to be effective. And that's why they don't use carbon, but do use technologies like Polygene in their base layers. But if there's not more scent control tech in this gear, I want to know what Sitka's perspective is on how we should practice scent control in their clothes. So here's Dennis on that question.
Yeah. So we actually, in our process of thinking about the unmet needs and the pain points of whitetail scent comes up, and one of the products we're going to be launching in 2015 is our launching pad, and it was really born off that, and we've all done it. We've all stood on the hood on the top of our totes and broke them up and danced to get into our rubber boots. We believe you keep your products separate. We believe you keep them contained. We've created a product to do that in our launching pad. We believe you change before you go in the woods, but you take that stuff back off when you get out of the woods. So we believe you hang those things out. So we've created products to help with that education. The launching pad's a great example of that. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's pretty cool. It also is a bow case. So, if you're that guy who's running out and I'm going to go hunt this morning, you can literally grab one product and go. For us, that's how you hunt scent. That's how you contain. I do personally use an O2 generator in mine. I know that does help absorb some of the scent, but that's not the entire process, but it's something that helps.
So there you go. And that product that Dennis mentioned, the launching pad, that is probably the new item that I'm the most excited about this year. Like he said, it's a all-in-one bow case, hunting clothing container or carrier, and a changing pad for outside of your truck in the morning and the evening when you're trying to get ready to head into the woods. It's pretty awesome. So if you want to learn more about that or any of the other products from Sitka Gear, visit sitkagear.com. And now let's get into the show. So let's start with something that, and again, a lot of these topics will be mistakes that we've probably heard about, we've probably talked about to some degree on the show. So these aren't necessarily going to be revolutionary, like, holy smokes, I've never heard of that before. But they're important, and even if you are a diehard deer hunter and you've heard all these things a million times before, I don't think it can be emphasized enough. and reminded enough about these things. And then finally, maybe the most important thing here, Dan, and you let me know what you think about this, but I think, we're even guilty of it here on Wired to Hunt. Right? We put out all these different articles and all these podcasts sharing all these tips and tricks and strategies and ideas and tactics. And there's a million things we're saying and that other people are saying and all this stuff out there. But none of it means crap if you don't implement some of it, if you don't take action. And I'm pretty sure, because I've been guilty of this in the past, that I would bet like 80% of the things that people say, if I were to tell, a group of people the top 10 best things that they need to know about deer hunting, or whatever it might be, if I gave them these great ideas that I know are amazing and that works for people, I bet you 8 out of 10 of those people won't even take action on most of it.
Right.
And so I think that's the big thing that I would just encourage everyone out there to do with all of our podcast episodes, with all of our articles. When you read this stuff, when you hear this stuff, try to find a way to take action on some of these things. And some things might not fit your style of hunting or your area, but what you do find interesting and intriguing, take action. Like, do the work. Don't just say, oh, interesting, and then forget about it when hunting season rolls around. I mean, do something about these things. So when we walk through these common mistakes, you've probably heard these things before, but really think about, okay, I've heard this mistake, but still every season somehow I end up doing it. What can you do differently this year to make sure you don't make this mistake again? I think that'd be my major goal for everyone today on the show listening is that you find one of these mistakes that we're going to talk about and actually think through a way that you can change it this year so you don't make that mistake, and then really, really do it.
Right. And in my last 9 years of hunting, I've been hunting since I was like 13, 14. I don't even remember. But then in 2006 is when I really jumped into the sport real heavy. And I started focusing on hunting mature deer. And it was then, and from that point until today, every one of these things we're going to talk about are things that have happened to me. And I'm sure you too. So it's not like we're sitting here going, hey, make sure you do this. Now, let me tell you why, because I messed up on it, last year, the year before, the previous year,
Yeah, definitely. So, let's just kick it off and start going through these, and hopefully there'll be some that can be helpful. And I think one of the most popular mistakes, one of the most common mistakes out there, and I've made it a million times, is, and we talk about it a lot, but getting lazy with entrance and exit routes. And in particular, I personally think exit routes are the easiest to screw up. Mm-hmm. And I say that because, at least for me, when I'm heading into a tree stand, I'm on edge. I know that I'm sneaking in. My hunt is ahead of me still, so I want to make sure I don't ruin that hunt. I really want to be careful. I'm quiet. I'm slow. I'm being strategic about how I get in and out, and I obviously have time to get there. Now, when I leave at night, lots of times, in the morning after my morning hunt or in the evening after the evening hunt, maybe I've got something I need to do back home. Maybe I'm late for something. Maybe dinner's on the kitchen, in the kitchen. Maybe whatever it is. I've been sitting in a tree for 4 hours in the freezing cold, and I'm just cold and sick and tired of being out there. There's a lot of reasons why after a hunt, you might just want to scoot back home quickly, and you're tired of being out in the woods, or you had a frustrating hunt, whatever it might be. I always have the temptation of just get me back to the truck. Like, I'm just ready to be done. And because of that fact, I've had a lot of times where I knew I shouldn't do what I'm doing, and then I did it anyways, where I would walk through a field because I didn't want to deal with a 30-minute walk through a bunch of brambles and stuff in the middle of the dark. Or I got down early, even though I knew there was deer still around and I spooked them. I knew I shouldn't do that, but I was like, screw it, I just got to get back. I got so-and-so going on. Or whatever it might be. Lots of times that's a temptation that's easy to fall for. I've done it. I bet you probably have too.
Yep. Every year.
Every year, yeah. And every year, though, I try to, and I think I get better every year in having like self-discipline. I think when it comes to that, it's just discipline. Like having the wherewithal after your hunt to say, nope, I'm going to take the long way. I'm going to wait till way after dark, or I'm going to make a plan to make sure I can get out here right. Whatever it is, thinking through that beforehand and then sticking to it after your hunt is just so important. I think, we go over and over it again, but when you're going after these mature bucks, you only have so many opportunities to screw up. You just get a couple free passes, maybe. And if one of your free passes is burnt out, when you are walking back through the middle of the field in the night and there's a buck out there after dark that you didn't see and you bust him out of there, you might have just ruined your chances of ever getting a shot at that buck that you dreamed about the entire summer and fall. And you blew it because you want to get back to have some chili. It's just not worth it, don't you think?
No, I agree 100%. And I'll go to the extent of this last year on a couple stands where, I'm looking at the weather. I know that the wind is going to shift. All right. So just imagine a square, right? And the northeast side, the top right side of the square is where my tree stand was. And my access route was for an east wind. Okay. Or no, excuse me, a west wind. So I walked on the east side of this square that I would say is the bedding area to get to my tree stand. And the wind shifted almost 180 degrees and was coming straight out of the east by the time I left. Now, if I took that same access route back to my truck, my scent's blowing into that square, into that bedding area. So I had to take a completely different access route out because the wind changed, and I headed straight east into the wind up until I got to this washout from a horse pasture and walked all the way up. It took me an additional 15 minutes to get to my truck, but I know my scent didn't go into that bedding area.
Yeah, and that's key because not only do you need to make sure you're visually or audibly not spooking those deer after your hunt, but scent is obviously still a big one. That goes for when you're going into your tree and when you're going out of your tree. You always need to be aware of those things. So like you said, going up a washout or creek bed or a ditch, that's a great way to get out. I had like a big, tall, grassy field along one of my properties that, I got the freaking hiccups. I had a big grassy field on one side and of a strip of timber, and then the other side was a cut crop field. And when I would exit a stand that I had over there, if I tried to walk along the crop field, I was spooking deer all the time. So the next year, what I did is I cut a path through that tall grassy field on the other side of the timber so that I could enter along the edge of the crop field because the deer weren't out there when I was heading into the stand in the afternoon. But when I exited, I could go, 100 yards farther to the north and go through this little path I had through the middle of this really tall grass that was away from the food source enough that I could sneak through there without being seen and get out quietly. And that significantly reduced, the number of deer I was spooking on my exits from that area. So that's something to consider. There's, if you can manage habitat in your property, you can even plant like screening cover. Where you can walk behind some trees that you planted or a strip of corn that you left or a strip of Egyptian wheat or something like that you can create a wall so at least you can visually be hidden on your entrance or exit routes.
Ditches, creek beds.
Yeah, all the above. And another one that, gets talked about a decent bit, it can sometimes be hard to pull off, but if you can do it, it is a really good way, is get a ride. If you're hunting near a field edge, that you can at least get to a field, or if that's where you're worried deer might be when you try to get out, if you can have someone come pick you up, that's very helpful. One example where I pulled this off, when I was hunting 6-shooter 3 years ago, I guess it was now, I wanted to hunt this food plot I had, and it was in December, and I knew I was only going to get a couple chances at them. And I figured, 1-2 hunts in that area, and if I screwed it up somehow and spooked him, I'd never see him again because, just tons and tons of hunting pressure around this area. I'd been leaving this property alone completely to try to make it a sanctuary so that he would, stick around there during gun season, and he did. But I knew, all right, if I'm going in there to hunt, I need a safe way to get out of there if I don't kill him, because if I, I'll spook him. So I ended up convincing my wife to drive my truck back there and hang out. And then once I was done hunting, she came, picked me up, spooked all the deer out with a truck. I was able to climb down the tree, walk to the field edge, hop into the truck, and get out of there. And, the deer just aren't going to be spooked in the same way by a truck as they would by a hunter walking along the edge of the trees. Right. So if you have the opportunity to do that, that's a good one. It's not going to work for every situation, but that's a pretty safe way to get out without them knowing that a hunter's there. They'll think it's a farmer or something. So that's one exit idea that can be worth having up your sleeve. Do you have any other thoughts on exit and entry routes, Dan?
No, don't be lazy.
Don't be lazy. That's probably a theme for a lot of these mistakes. So many of the mistakes that are commonly made are like common sense things that we just get lazy about, and don't take the time to deal with.
Right.
And man, it can be tough, especially later in the season. At least for me, like I don't know about you, but early in the season it's easy because I'm amped up. I've been thinking about it all off season. I can pay attention to the details. But when it gets to day 10 of my rut hunt and I've been waking up at 3:30 every morning, it gets a little bit more difficult to stick to every one of my little things. Or when it's December 20th and I've hunted 80 times already this year and still haven't killed a deer, it gets a little tough to cross all my T's and dot my I's.
Well, and it's one of these things that some people just have to learn the hard way. For me, that's the kind of, I'm the kind of person who, yeah, I'll take advice, but I'm gonna still do what I want. You know what I mean? And for me, it took me to learn the hard way. It took for me to say, oh my God, I should have walked in the other direction, especially when you watch a 180-inch deer catch your ground scent.
Yeah, that'll definitely make a lesson stick.
Right. Or when you see a deer, a giant deer, and he's coming right towards you, and you call. Why would you call? He's coming right towards you. Lesson learned.
Yep. It definitely, those personal experiences can be much more.
And that's what I think. That's what it takes. Someone who, we talk about being a good hunter all the time. Whatever that means, but you have to learn. If you don't learn from your mistakes, and that's what it takes for a lot of these guys, including myself. It's like, oh, bing, light goes off in my head. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to blind call. I'm not going to, walk straight to my tree stand where I should take the long way around.
Yeah, my hope is that, by, all the different media out there and with what we're doing, hopefully some people can learn from our mistakes and avoid them themselves and not have to learn it the hard way. But, inevitably, in a lot of cases, you still do have to learn it yourself too. So
right.
What's your next common mistake that we need to make sure we're not making in the next couple months?
Well, believe it or not, Mark, it's not jumping into your good spots too early.
Something we like to talk about, isn't it?
I know. So, you know me, I'm a huge fan of hunting early season, but I don't think people are understanding what I mean by that, and I'll explain here. If you have a good spot, a bedding area that typically holds, deer, and you have some trail cameras outside of that's catching some movement, either coming to or going away from the trail cameras. I used to be the kind of guy who used to cannonball in, October 1st, game time, boom, into the timber, like a wild bull running to my stand. You're like, I'm going to kill a deer.
I feel like that's how you enter your house, like after a day at work. You slam the door open.
What's for dinner? and that's how I used to be, right? And then I got introduced to trail cameras and provide that, those provided me with a lot of information about deer movement. So what I mean by jumping into the good spots too early is, let's say you have a spot that's a long walk in and it's early season. I'm not even gonna touch that unless I have evidence that deer are in that area. Like if I have a buck coming to a scrape or visiting a field edge or coming back to that bedding area, and I catch him on a trail camera that's on a main trail or a pinch point, I'm not going to touch that area unless I have proof that there is big deer there. Especially for early season, it's like I need proof to make that call.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely it does.
So it's not like I'm hunting mornings just to hunt. It's calculated, and I'm doing my research. I'm gathering my intel, and if I feel like it might be worth, I'm going to sit an observation stand, a morning or a night before I jump into that area. I'm not just going to cannonball in there.
Yeah, I think the phrase that Adam Hayes used last week is perfect for this, and this is how I like to approach deer hunting: is surgically removing a mature buck from his habitat. It's a surgical strike, or as my friend Craig Doherty likes to say, it's a drone strike. You're collecting this intel, you're analyzing that intel. You know exactly when you want to hit, where you want to hit, and why you want to hit there. And then when all those things line up, you go in and you tack. That's how I believe the most successful and consistent hunters of mature bucks operate. And that's how I try to operate. And that, in my opinion, is the single biggest thing that has changed how I hunt and the success that I have is by doing this, by paying attention to the timing. So when you go in and hunt these spots, and why you do go in when you do. It just cannot be understated. We've probably talked about it, once every 3 episodes. We probably talk about this general idea to some degree, but waiting to the right conditions, or the right time, or the right intel to go into these certain areas is going to make or break your season, in my opinion. Because if you blow into these areas and pressure those deer before you really have an opportunity to kill them, you're just taking yourself out of the game before it even starts.
Right. So I got a question for you.
I got an answer.
I'm looking for a little bit of advice. All right. Now, I have trail camera pictures from last year of Mark Kenyon in a pinch point at 10:30 a.m. on October 3rd and 11 o'clock a.m. on October 4th. Okay. That's damn near midday movement. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
So, if it was just one time, I would be like, okay, maybe he got bumped from his bed. 2 times in a row, those 2 days. Now, we've had guests on the podcast say, we need, if I got a deer there at that day, I'm going to be in that area, 2 days, for 3 days that surround that date. And, because deer tend to do the same thing the same times every year. Would you be in that area the opening week of the season to try to encounter that movement?
Answer me this. What does it take to get into that spot? Is it the kind of area that's like, is it going to be a really high risk thing going in there to hunt in the morning or middle of the day? What's that going to be like?
So last year I had, it is the perfect, it's one of the best pinch points I have on the property. It's the second best actually. And tons of deer travel in and out of this corner of this cattle pasture meets this low spot, and they don't cross the fence. They drop down into this low spot and then head back up again by this fence corner, because if they go out into the pasture, they get exposed. But what I've done is I've micromanaged this area, and I've moved my tree stand to the main trail that leads down into it. So because the reason I moved it was because the thermals in the morning were kind of acting like ocean tides if there wasn't a consistent wind. So my scent was going up and then back down into the draw, and up and then back down in the draw, and it was just blowing everything out. And then when the wind would pick up, it would blow my scent into a completely different direction, the direction that I initially wanted it to go. So my scent zone was gigantic, all right? And I was getting busted all the time. So I got out of there. This year I moved it up on top of the ridge where this main trail goes down into that pinch point. And that's where I have my tree stand set up now.
Can you get in there in the morning without spooking deer?
Yes. If I take my time, I go in slow, and I do it on the right wind, I believe I can.
Then here's what I would do. And this is different than what I would have done last year probably, but Mr. Mark Drury was so compelling in his argument about the nature of an annual pattern for bucks. And then someone else, I can't remember who this was, but maybe it was Adam or someone else recently, someone we talked about the same thing, the annual pattern. Maybe it was Don. It was Don Higgins who talked about the annual pattern, right? How they'll do things year after year. So many people we've talked to recently have been re-emphasizing this, that it is, giving me more reason to pay attention to this even more than before. If the weather is right, so assuming you don't have like an 85-degree day, that morning where it just doesn't seem like anything's going to move, I would probably, even though in past I wouldn't have hunted mornings like that, I think with that kind of intel that you have, and if you can get in there without the high likelihood of spooking something, I think if you've got half-decent conditions, I'd probably be there.
Okay. And it's funny because this year, October 3rd and 4th fall on a weekend, so I will be able to hunt it. And hopefully a nice south wind happens, because that's what I need, a south, maybe just a little bit southwest to get in there and have the wind do what I want. And that time of year, a south wind is pretty standard. So um, I kind of hope I get those conditions, and um, I think I'll go in and give her a try.
Yeah. I think the important thing here is that, you are going to go in here because of, we've listed like 4 different
Info.
whys. All these like trail camera pictures. You've identified this perfect set of an area where they're going to move through. You can get in there without spooking deer, assuming you have the right weather, or assuming you have the right wind. All these factors go into why you would ever hunt there at that time. 10 years ago, I would have said, okay, if this is the best tree stand on the property, boom, October 1st, bam, I want to hunt there. I'm excited.
Yep.
And that would have been a bad idea.
Yep.
And so I think the difference in what I really want to encourage everyone to remember is that, if you are going to go into one of these better areas, there better be a whole lot of whys. You
Yep.
better be able to list 3, 4, 5, 6 different specific reasons why this is the right time, why that's the right spot at the specific time. And I think if you start approaching your hunting like that,
Yep.
your success is just going to go up night and day, because all of this is predicated on the fact that hunting pressure is the biggest influencer of deer movement, deer sightings during daylight, all that kind of stuff, above and beyond everything we've ever talked about weather, moon phase, barometer. All those things are great and dandy, and they naturally affect deer movement. But if you're in their property spooking deer all the time, you're just not going to see mature bucks during daylight. If you continuously do that, it's just not going to happen. So you need to be very careful about how you apply that pressure, and that obviously comes from when you're hunting. So you need to be careful about when you hunt to minimize the pressure, and then understand how all these other conditions affect deer naturally to make sure you are hunting at the right times in the right places. So that's it. I'm done. That's my rant for the day. That's important stuff, though. So true, though. So important. Anything more on that one? What's next? Yeah. How about this one? And this is continuing in the similar vein here, but it's, don't make the mistake of hunting the same tree over and over and over again, because it's pressure. When you hunt, you're leaving scent. Some deer are hearing you, some deer are seeing you, some deer are smelling you while you're there. They might smell you when you walk out. They might smell you a day later. Whatever it is, you are leaving sign, and deer, especially mature deer, are going to react to that, right? Mm-hmm. So every time you hunt a tree stand, it's getting a little bit less likely you'll be able to kill a deer there every time, because there's a greater chance that a buck's picked you off or learned something about your presence there. And as we've talked about before, as you know and as I know, sometimes it gets easy to want to just hunt the same stand. Mm-hmm. You're going to see deer there maybe. It's easy to get to maybe. It's maybe been traditionally very successful for you. Whatever it might be, I've certainly fell into this trap.
Let's just put all the cards on the table right now. I mean, if you only have a very small property to hunt and you have one tree stand on it, okay, I would suggest moving your tree stand around a couple times, or having another tree stand in there. Just, even if it's just 20 acres or 10 acres or whatever it is, have multiple options, even if it's small pieced. But if you're the kind of person who just loves to sit in a tree stand and observe nature and maybe kill a young deer that walks by, that's fine. That's awesome. But if you want to kill a mature deer, if there is mature deer on that small piece, every time you go in there, it learns about you. That's what these deer do. They learn just as much about you as we learn from them. So hold up and don't go in there straight up until it's good. And we've talked about what those conditions are on this podcast until we're blue in the face. So it's up to, it's up to you, the listener, to implement that. Every time you go in there and you don't see this deer, he is learning something about you, because the wind, your scent, I don't care what kind of scent control steps you're taking, you are leaving scent there, period.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I liked what Adam had talked about last week, the fact that Andre DeQuisto told his buddy, hunt a different tree stand every single night you hunt on your property, and you'll have completely different success. He had told this story about how this guy had been hunting this property and never could get a big mature buck. He took Andre's advice. He hunted a different stand every time, and boom, he kills the biggest deer of his life. Yep. I think that's a really good example of what can happen when you change things up. Don't let those deer learn you.
And I'll put it to you. I'll give you a specific example. I used to be a one tree stand setter myself back in the day, probably about 2003, right when I got out of college. I saw a big buck in this field. And so I'm like, oh my, I'm going to sit in this stand every day and he'll come out eventually. And I did that. Well, in November, all the trees are off the tree, or all the leaves are off the trees. And I watch these deer come from a thick bedding area and they hold up until dark every single day until I can't see anymore. And then they leave. And my trail camera shows pictures of these bucks and these deer in this field. So they learned my pattern.
Oh, yeah. Doesn't surprise me either.
I watched it firsthand. I saw them stand up out of these bedding areas, come to a staging area, and wait.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about this one? The solution to fix this problem comes down to the same thing we've talked about this whole last 45 minutes. It's just having the gumption to actually do the extra work and do the harder thing, which is put another stand up, hang a new set, move. Yep. It just comes down to not being lazy.
Yep.
So
I needed to move in there to that staging area and set up very quietly that next night and wait. But did I? No, because I thought, oh man, I have a ladder stand. I'm not going to be able to get it in there.
Yeah. And this is
I was my own worst enemy.
Yeah. I think anyone out there, and this is something that I keep on, seeing more and more with what I'm doing and trying to change it more and more, but just changing things up, adjusting when you have to. I want to throw this out there. If one of you guys or girls listening, if you try this coming year, if you see something, you hunt a stand and you realize you need to adjust, or you're just realizing, hey, I got to keep moving my stand. If you become more mobile, hunt different areas, avoid hunting the same tree stand over and over. If you do that and you have success with it, I want you to email me through the contact form Wired to Hunt, and I will pick one of you. If there's only one of you, you win by default. If a bunch of people email back with success on this specific story, if you remember this after hunting season or during hunting season, email me, and I'm going to pick someone and give you a Wired to Hunt hat and shirt, because I would be super darn proud of you for doing that, for taking the extra effort to change things up.
I would love to talk with them on the show. That would be awesome.
That would be cool. That's something I want to start doing too in future episodes. Is finding some way to get our listeners a little more involved. We'll see what that looks like. Which we do have the Whitetail Q&A podcast now, which is going to be getting people's questions on the air, which is cool. I'll mention that again at the end of the show. But yeah, I agree. I want to talk to some of these people that are implementing some of the things we talk about on this show and actually having success with it. Hearing those success stories, I know they're happening, and I've heard about them in email, but I think we should be sharing those with our listeners too. So, what's your next one, Dan?
All right. So my next one, and this is something that I have no problem doing this next thing on evening hunts. But for morning hunts, I'm the kind of person who I get out there and I'm in my stand maybe 20 minutes before the sun comes up. I need to, and I challenge everybody else out there to get to your stand earlier. Now, a lot of people say, I've talked to, people on both sides. I get out there real early, or I get there 5 minutes before I'm supposed to, because your scent's going to be cascading into the timber. Well, if your scent is going somewhere where the deer might bust you, then you're probably set up wrong.
Right. By default, you're already in trouble.
Right. And if you're walking an access route to that stand that is going to blow it out, you don't know when the deer are coming through. You're just hoping they come through during daylight hours or while you're in that tree stand. So my goal this year, especially for morning hunts, is to get to the stand at least 30 minutes to an hour before the sun comes up. Probably closer to an hour. I want to be in there when the stars are still shining, and I want to have everything settle down to where the deer, I feel that there's instances where you get in there and there's a spooking point where if I'm going 20 minutes before sunlight, the deer are going, whoa, I'm going to take another route around. But if I'm going in an hour in, they might hold up, double check everything, then come through the area.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that.
Yeah.
I think this was our guest in episode number 60, 64 or something. I don't even know what it was, but John Eberhardt, Michigan guy, he was the one who convinced me in his book that I read, I don't know, a decade ago or something, about the importance of getting in there super early, especially on those morning sits. And so I do exactly what you just talked about, Dan. I'm always trying to get in there about an hour beforehand. Like, I like to be quiet by an hour. So
Right.
I'll try to get in there like an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes before daylight so that there's a full 60 minutes of me sitting there quietly, letting it cool down. And I know that's excessive, maybe some people might think, but like you said, Dan, I really do think it makes a difference. And when it comes to, and again, all these things, it's these little details. It's taking the extra effort to move. It's taking the little bit of extra effort to get in a half hour earlier than you usually do. It's all these little tiny things add up. And when it comes to trying to kill these mature old bucks, that's what you have to do. I mean, sure, you can get lucky once in a while, but if you want to consistently have success on deer like this, and then even more so if you're trying to pull this off, east of the Mississippi in Michigan or Pennsylvania or New York or Georgia or South Carolina or whatever, you have to become obsessive about this stuff if you want to be consistent with it, because it's a game of inches. My favorite football coach in the world, Mr. Mark D'Antonio at Michigan State, always talks about football as a game of inches. It's, one little thing here can make the difference between winning and losing, and that's exactly what it is with hunting mature deer. I think you just have to pay attention to those little things.
Yep, I agree. So I need to just do. It's one of those things, like, it's up to me to do it. It's not up to anybody else. I can't. I got to set my alarm earlier. I can't, hey mom, because I don't live with
you don't
my
live with your mom anymore.
But I stay at their place when it's hunting season. Hey mom, get me up. So.
Yep, that's true. Nothing we've talked about here is rocket science.
Yep.
If you just simply took these common sense ideas that we talk about all the time, that a lot of people talk about all the time, and if you just took the extra effort to really religiously do these things, your success rate would go up astronomically. I think just the fact is that most people, and like we've both done it ourselves too, but most of us end up getting lazy, complacent for whatever reasons there might be. There's always excuses, but it's just not following through on what we know we need to do.
Yep.
So
I'm gonna pick the next question, and I'm gonna aim it towards you.
all right, what you got?
Why do you use scent control? Why do you have a scent control regimen?
Well, there's the very simple answer that obviously we know that the white-tailed deer's greatest defense mechanism is his nose. Mm-hmm. And I realize the fact that you need to play the wind as much as you possibly can, right? The number one thing we need to be thinking about when trying to set up on a deer is how that deer is going to use the wind in his nose, and then how we can appropriately set ourselves up so as best as possible avoid him getting downwind of us. But that said, even though I'm always thinking about that, you just never know what's going to happen. Deer are wild animals. They don't follow our rules. They don't always follow what we think they're going to do. And there's always a chance that a deer is going to get downwind of you. Or even if a deer doesn't get downwind of you, like we just talked about a couple minutes ago, if your scent is getting out there, regardless of what you do, some amount of human scent's getting out there. And when that scent is, blowing around, or the next day a deer walks by and crosses your path, they'll smell you. And again, we want to keep that awareness that deer have about us hunting them as minimal as possible. So part of the way I can improve that is by having a really strict scent control regimen. Even with all the things that I do and use and all the things that you do too, I'm a firm believer that you can't beat a deer's nose 100% of the time. No way. Not going to happen. All you can do is minimize it as much as possible. You can make a dent in it. You can get away with a little more. So I try everything I possibly can to do that, just because, again, it comes down to details. And this is an area that, again, I screw up sometimes. I get lazy. I'm in a rush, or whatever it might be. But I shouldn't do this, and as much as possible, you guys shouldn't either, is get lazy with your scent control. Because of all these things I just talked about. It's so important. If you want to get a second chance at a buck, or if you don't want to lose those chances you're going to have at a mature deer, you need to minimize your scent profile as much as you possibly can. Do you agree with or disagree with anything I said there, Dan?
Man, I tell you what, I feel that the proper access to your tree stand is very, very important. Okay. If you feel a deer may cross your path when coming through this area, then you're probably set up wrong, or you need to have a different access to that tree stand, access route to that tree stand. I am not a huge believer in the kind of scent control extremes that most people take. All right. I believe in ozonics. All right. I believe in a little bit of that nose jammer stuff. I think that works awesome. But for me, I take my green showers, just, I don't know why, because I don't feel that, I feel that if I use Dove or something with scent, it would have the same kind of effect as the green stuff would. I've been in, obviously I hunt lower pressure areas than most, but I've been at work all day long and have gone straight to the tree stand without spraying down, without putting in, my scent-free deodorant or anything like that, and have seen decent success. And I know you talked about your, some of these are just precautionary measures, just in case something does come downwind of you. I just feel that you can be in the right spot at the right time and have the right access to that stand without being 100% scent crazy, like scent control crazy.
I can't argue with that. I mean, you can pull that off. Yep. My argument, though, would be, but what happens the 10% or 20% of the time when it doesn't work out right?
Right. And I don't know. I guess I'm not a huge scent freak. I mean, during the rut, I'm taking one shower a day. Even if I go back in and take a nap, I typically take it in the morning for my morning hunt, and the afternoon, I'm using my ozonics and stepping in cow poop or horse poop on the way, which I feel is an awesome strategy, by the way. And I'm not joking. Step in animal poop on your way to your stand.
Yeah, no, I follow you. I know you're not joking, but it just seems like a very much a Dan Johnson move.
Yeah, it is a Dan Johnson move, but I don't know. I feel that there are certain things that we as hunters have been, I don't want to say swindled into thinking. I feel that a majority of human scent comes out of your mouth. From your gut, from what you eat, and that's where a majority of your scent comes from. And they don't have any rebreathers or scent control for your breath, except for an ozonics in the tree, but most, I don't know about you, but do you have your ozonics on when you're walking to the tree?
No.
Or do you put any spray in your mouth for, while you're breathing?
No.
You know what I mean? So it's like, how much are we really doing when we spray down with all this stuff and do all these things? I mean, I just don't feel it's doing enough to trick a whitetail's nose.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see, my take on this is I can't prove how much each individual thing helps.
Yep.
But it just comes down to me being the fact that because there's so many things that can go wrong on a hunt, right? The wild animals, weather, whatever the deer wants, there's so many things that can go wrong. If there's something that I can do that's my choice, that's up to me, that might be able to help me incrementally, even like 1%, I'll take every single one of those 1% gains I can take. So I'll do 15 little things that maybe don't seem like a big deal, but if I do all 15 of those things every time, and then hypothetically, maybe that gives me a 15% chance better, and I'll take that every day. So that's my take on it. I understand what you're saying, but I personally would rather be OCD about as many things as I can to minimize the variables.
Right.
So that's my take. It's a cost-benefit analysis you got to do.
That's right.
So, scent
There's
control.
that.
There's that. I think the mistake, though, was being my thought process was that, the mistake would be getting lazy about it.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. I recommend you pay attention to the details as much as you can, but you got to play the wind right first. You got to do all the other things right too.
Right. I mean, there are, like what we talk about. One of those things when it comes to hunting these big deer or these mature deer is finding a wind that is right for the deer and not necessarily right for you. So there's that fine line, that invisible line where your scent is gonna almost bust you, get you busted, and finding that perfect line is very hard to do.
Yeah, I think Adam did a nice job giving us an example last week of that, because I think it's one of those things that when you talk about, it can be hard for some people. It might be hard to visualize that situation. Yep. So it's helpful to look at specific examples like what Adam shared with us and others. It's really important to figure that out. So what's another mistake you want to share?
Oh boy, I think for me, it's just following through with the goals I've set for myself. I mean, every year I find myself getting tired and making mistakes without me knowing it. So or getting complacent, thinking that, every year deer come through this area, or every year, like clockwork, when, I need to take some of my own advice and just do instead of, coming up with all these crazy plans. Or I overanalyze. I know you do too. We talk about it all the time. I feel like I should just start going with my gut more. Take the information that I've learned, and just go with my gut. Don't sit here and go, well, if the wind is just a little bit more this way, maybe I should hunt this stand, or because, like Adam Hayes said last week, typically the gut reaction is the best reaction.
Yeah, but I do think, again, it's just my take, but I do think you need to train your gut.
Oh yeah.
And I know, right, we're doing this kind of thing. But if I were to say this 10 years ago, if I was following my gut, I wouldn't be seeing much at all, It's only after you think through a lot of these things, you see these situations, you test theories, you get out there in the woods, that your quote-unquote gut can start to really be accurate. And I think, for me, it's a balancing act, right? We still want to do some type of, if we want to perform a surgical strike, a drone strike on this deer, you have to analyze things. But it's knowing where's that line between developing a strong plan versus totally overanalyzing it. I think that's the key, is figuring out where that line is and making sure you're not crossing it. Yep. And that's the trick. And I think that's where, in a deer hunter's career trajectory, not career, but, as we grow as a deer hunter, there's a point, we're learning to hunt, we're just figuring out how to see deer and how to get a shot at a deer, and eventually we kill a deer, and then someday some of us decide that we want to hunt mature deer, so then we learn how to kill mature deer on occasion, and as we're going through all this, we're learning all these different things about how deer, operate and how we can take advantage of that, and we get to this point where we start caring about the things that you and me are talking about, like the things we're talking about, all these details, all these specific conditions, and how to set up in a certain way, and how such and such will affect deer, and how that might influence where we want to hunt, blah, blah, blah. This is pretty advanced stuff, right? I mean, probably most deer hunters out there are not thinking about this kind of thing. But for those people that are at the level where they're starting to think about this stuff, there's that first step, which is thinking about these things. The next step is understanding how this affects your strategy. And then that next plateau, I don't know if it's plateau, but the peak, in my opinion, is the Jedi level that someone like Adam Hayes or Andre DeQuisto or all these people that we talk to, that Jedi level is when you know how to analyze these things, you know how to take all these inputs and analyze it and then come up with a solution, and then it becomes something that then becomes gut instinct, because you don't need to think about this stuff and obsess over it. It becomes second nature. And I think that Jedi status is something that doesn't come for a long time. It takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of screwing up. And it takes a lot of time just thinking about these things. And so I don't think we need to feel bad when we make mistakes, when we try to analyze this stuff and analyze it wrong, or when we get caught up in it. It's natural. It's going to take time. But it's Man,
I'm just saying, don't ignore it.
absolutely. Yeah. It's,
Because I go a lot by feel. That's just me. Like I I that's for my life. And then it's like when I talk about deer hunting, I kind of push my feeling off, and I go to a numbers game, and I feel like a lot of a lot of hunters, including myself, if they acknowledge that feeling, they they may or may not be successful, but we're predators too. You know what I mean? We're animals, and I'm sure we have some kind of sense. That the way we live our lives today may turn down those senses, so to speak. But I think that they're in us, and if we have the ability to acknowledge it and to use it, I think that will be a great tool for us.
yeah, it's all about getting in tune with that. Yeah.
Yep,
getting
exactly.
in tune with that.
That's kind of hippie talk, though.
It's good though. It's
Yeah.
good. I like your heavy talk.
Good.
All right. How about another one? I think we can cover another one or two maybe. How about this? Calling.
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah. Calling is something that it's one of those kind of get rich quick type deals where it's like it's a little tool, it's a trick that you see on TV or you watch, you see an ad in the magazine or something that's like, wow, this will call a deer in, boom, easy, they'll come in right to where I'm at and I'm going to kill a deer.
I need to get my black rack out, slam it together, and a booner will be in front of my stand.
And if I have this product, it doesn't matter where I hunt as long as I'm within 200 yards of seeing that animal, because if I see him, he'll come right to me.
Boom.
Boom. And unfortunately, that's just not true in almost all scenarios.
Yep.
I think calling can be a very useful tool and tactic when applied in the right situations at the right time and in the right way. But it's not a cure-all. It's not something you can do all the time willy-nilly, and it's not going to just be something that's going to work for you all the time. So common mistake is calling at the wrong times or just calling too much in general, I would say. I personally think that blind calling is something that I used to do a bunch, and now I almost don't do it all anymore. I might do a little bit of blind rattling with a strategy if for a specific reason, but I think that when you're calling, you don't know where a deer is, there's a good chance that you could unknowingly put yourself in a position for that deer to find out where you are, because you're calling attention to you. Even though you're calling attention to yourself and saying, I'm a deer, you're still calling attention to the fact that, hey, there is a sentient being over here that you might want to check out. And so that deer might look up in the area. You might not even know there's a deer around, but he might spot you moving because now he knows there's something over there. Or you might not know there's a deer around, but he happens to hear you, and he says, well, I want to know what that grunting noise is over there. So he's going to circle downwind of you and smell you before you even knew he was in the area. Or maybe there's this deer 75 yards out in some thick stuff, and you're blind calling away, and he doesn't come out. So 10 minutes later, you're like, nothing came out. I'm going to try again. Grunt, grunt, grunt. 20 minutes later, he still doesn't come out, but that's because he's sitting there in that patch of thick stuff staring in your direction saying, what the heck is that? And you keep calling, and that deer obviously eventually figures out that's not natural. And you spook that deer without ever knowing that he was in the area. All these different examples of ways that you can educate deer by calling too much or at the wrong times, I think, lend itself or makes me believe that calls, at least I will only use calls in specific scenarios when I can see a deer, I can watch his reaction, and I can make sure that he's not going to use that signal from me to then learn what I am. Mm-hmm. What's your take?
It's the same thing. To be honest with you, if it's always good to have your calls with you, but if you're in a high pressure situation, like, I've never hunted in Michigan or Pennsylvania, so maybe I shouldn't comment on it. But if you're in a high pressure area where other guys are rattling at this deer, just leave your antlers in the truck.
Yeah.
Make your move based off those hunters and what they're doing, if that's an option. But for me, I have literally learned this particular lesson the hard way. Every time, every calling mistake a person's made, I've made it. And to this day, the only time I will grunt is if I see a deer I want to come in. The only time I will rattle, for the most part, is if I see a buck that I want to shoot. Now, if it's the last day or last 2 days of my vacation, I'll throw Hail Marys out there and I'll blind rattle. But I'm not blind calling anymore.
Yeah.
Except for that instance.
Yeah, I just think there's too many risks.
Yep. We all know what deer do when we see them. They loop downwind and they try to wind us. Now, if you're blind calling, just imagine what the deer are doing that you don't see. They're doing the same exact thing, just in a bigger circumference, and they're busting you without even seeing you.
Yeah.
Or you seeing them.
Yep. I think it's super common because we see people using calls all the time on TV, and they show the situations where they're successful with it, and it looks incredible. And calls can be, they can work really well in certain situations, and that's awesome. I mean, that is fun to rattle in a buck and see him charging in, or snort wheeze at a buck and see him puff up and come strutting in wanting to kick your butt. That's awesome.
Yep.
But just don't be swayed too much by those things and get too excited.
Yep.
That's what I'd say.
It's one of those things too where this is also a learning experience. It's even if you see a deer, you read his body language, and that may deem yes or no to call too.
Definitely.
So, and that's a hard thing to learn unless you spend a lot of time in the tree stand and have had some interactions with some deer, whether they're making a scrape or raking a tree or they're kind of walking real slow with full alert forward. Don't call at him then, or call when he's making a scrape, or there's so many different scenarios. But if we were to make a T-shirt, it would say, "Stop blind calling."
Dan, if you make that shirt, I will. If you design that shirt, I will wear it, and I will buy some, like a handful of them.
Okay. Let me throw it together.
Let's do it, and then maybe people will want to buy it.
Yeah,
or maybe not.
We'll make millions off of it, buy a giant chunk of timber, and then
this is our plan.
This is of course, my idea. So it's going to be like an 80-20 split.
Right, you get 20%.
Okay, it just seems fair.
Oh man. Oh, shoot. I know what I was going to say. I was going to say, we've talked about this before, which we've talked about a lot of these things before, but I do think it's helpful to review. And if you didn't hear some of these past episodes, when it comes to calling, my thought process is if I call once, if that deer hears me and visually you can see that he heard you and he starts to come your way, I stop calling. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to call anymore. I've seen so many people, I've done it before too, like he hears you, he starts walking your way, but then he stops and he stands there. I'd start calling again. I just keep calling away. That's a big mistake. So don't call after you have his attention and he's moving your direction. And
don't call after you get busted.
Yes, that was the next one. If he obviously doesn't like what he's hearing, doesn't like what's going on, he starts moving away or he busts and spooks. Don't try calling anymore because you're just educating even more. It's like, all right, there's something here I didn't quite like. I'm going to leave. And then he hears, a bazooka going off in the tree, and he's like, yep, okay, my instincts were right. That's an idiot hunter. Yeah. Don't give him that.
Yeah.
Don't give him that at all. So that's calling. Common mistake. Dan, do you have a final one you want to cover? Because I think we should probably wrap it up.
Man, we've this is our 70th episode.
Yeah, 70 episodes.
We've covered a lot. I mean, really what I'm going to recommend between now and whenever your season starts is to go back and listen to some old podcasts about what, and they're pretty much labeled of what they are. And, whether it's calling or it's how to plant a food plot or, whatever it is that you want to know about, go back and listen to old podcasts, and there's tons of information that we've already discussed that's out there for you.
Oh yeah.
Just re-listen to it, get what you need, and then absorb that information. Don't just listen to it, hear it,
and take action on it.
And take action on it. And, that doesn't go for you. I mean, that goes for me. Here I am on a podium, telling you guys what to do. I got to do it too. And I'm just as guilty every year of not doing it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like I'm a hypocrite at times. I just need to, boom, do it. Boom,
yeah,
do it.
No,
boom,
I think it's fair to say that both you and me and any other person out there that talks about, sharing their deer hunting advice, we all make mistakes. We're all making a lot of these same mistakes. We're just like anyone else. We're just simply trying to learn from as many of those mistakes as we can, minimize the mistakes, get a little better every year, and share some of those learning experiences. That's all I think we're trying to do here.
And facial hair kills big bucks.
Well,
it's a fact.
Unfortunately, that doesn't serve well for my future. But I'm growing a little more every year. So
I mean, I'm serious. You put a little time and effort into your facial hair, it's gonna happen for you.
Well, what can I do to improve my facial hair?
Rogaine or something. My grandpa. Here's a funny story. My grandpa. This is kind of gross, but he goes, "Oh, you want to have a goatee like your uncle? You got to put a little chicken manure in your bottom lip, and then a little pig manure on the outside of your lip." I'm like, what would that do? He's like, the pig manure pulls and the chicken manure pushes.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that might be a little precursor to how I am today.
Yeah, I was gonna say this explains a lot. Your family tree had a strong influence on you, I think.
That's right. But seriously, facial hair kills big bucks.
Facial hair helps Dan kill big bucks.
Not me. Everybody.
Everybody?
So if you're a woman, give it a try.
All right, well, there you go. That'll be our parting advice today. Dan's going to leave you with that gem of wisdom.
And you're going to edit out the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. We're just going to nix this whole thing.
Yep.
We've got a 35-minute podcast today with just me, Mark, talking.
Mark talking.
All right, well, this was fun. We got to just kind of...
This was fun.
Hopefully there's something helpful within this, which I think there was. But with that, I think we'll wrap up the show, Dan. We have a couple updates. Number one, we mentioned it briefly before, but the new podcast from Wired to Hunt has launched. It's called Whitetail Q&A. It's a short-form podcast twice a week. We're listening to one of your listeners submitted questions, and then me or an expert guest is answering that question for you, and that's the whole episode. 10 to 15 minutes long usually, short and sweet, and straight to the point. So make sure to check that out. It is now on iTunes. If you search for Whitetail Q&A, you'll see it there, or Stitcher if you use an Android device, or you can find it on the Wired to Hunt website at wiredtohunt.com/whitetailqa. And if you go there, you can submit your own question. So please do that. We want your questions. We want to answer them. If you're listening to Whitetail Q&A or the Wired to Hunt podcast on iTunes and you're enjoying them, we, of course, as we always say, really, really, really appreciate you leaving a rating or review. We're almost to 300 reviews. I think we're at 296. So it'd be awesome to get over that 300 mark, and we appreciate your help doing that. Other than that, if your season's opening up, which I know a couple people are, I know Nebraska opens up in a day or two soon here in North Dakota and some other states like that. If you're hunting, good luck out there. Of course, we do want to thank our partners who help make the Wired to Hunt podcast possible. So big thank you to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Huntera Maps, Ozonics, Carbon Express, Lacrosse Boots, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. And so with that all being said, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you. Good luck out hunting there, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.